Okay. I think we're going to start. Okay. The regular meeting of the Board of Education for May 14, 2019 is called to order. There you go. Welcome to everybody present and to our television viewers. For tonight's meeting, any item that will be voted on this evening has been posted as required by state law. This meeting is being televised live and will be replayed throughout the next 2 weeks. Please check the board website for replay times. This meeting is also being streamed live on our PPS TV Services website. We have interpreters with us this evening, and I'd like to ask them to come forward at this time, introduce themselves in the language into which they'll be interpreting, and inform the audience where they'll be located in the auditorium should someone need their assistance.
Hola y muy buenas tardes, me llamo Daniel y voy a estar ofreciendo servicio en interpretación en español para los que les gustaría. Y también si hay gente que quiere señalar con las manos, yo puedo acercarme hacia ustedes. Muchas gracias.
Chào buổi tối quý vị, tôi là thông dịch Việt Nam. Tôi sẽ đứng ở dưới phía sau, nếu mà ai cần thông dịch thì tôi sẽ đứng ở phía sau. Cảm ơn.
Здравствуйте, меня зовут Жанна, я переводчик с русского и на русский язык. Если кому-то нужен мой сервис, я здесь для вас, обращайтесь.
لغة الصومال هديرة بتتلو فسره أنا عزيز كسمات.
Здравствуйте, меня зовут Даша, я переводчица русского и украинского языка, и если вам нужна моя помощь, я буду сзади зала.
Xin chào quý vị, tôi là phiên dịch Việt Nam. Nếu ai cần hỗ trợ, tôi sẽ ở đằng sau để hỗ trợ quý vị.
你好，我係你嘅廣東話翻譯，我喺依邊。你好，我是你的華語翻譯，有需要的可以找我，我在這邊。
Mi nombre es Obdulio Chavarría Jr., soy intérprete de español. Si alguien necesita mi ayuda, voy a estar allá atrás. No tenga pena venir a preguntarme.
Mi nombre es Concha Palomo y trabajo para Passport to Languages. Hablo español. Si me necesitan mis servicios, voy a estar atrás. Gracias.
Mi nombre es Katia Pineda, soy ocupada de intérprete español, voy a estar allá atrás también. Gracias.
Director Constam is absent tonight because she's attending senior night festivities with her son, who is a graduating senior. Board members, are there any items in the business agenda that you have questions on that you would like to pull out? This does not include individual action items listed on tonight's agenda.
I'd like to pull out the 3 second readings, just so we have a brief public discussion or overview of them before we actually vote on them.
Okay. We're going to move right into student and public comment. I'd like to review the guidelines for public comment. The board thanks the community for taking the time to attend this meeting and provide your comments to the board. We value public input as it informs our work, and we look forward to hearing your thoughts, reflections, and concerns. Our responsibility as a board is to actively listen without distraction from electronic devices or papers. One quick reminder, if you could keep oversized signs down so that you don't block the view of other people, that would be appreciated. And if we need to keep some space on the stairs so that people can leave if necessary. Okay, thank you. Board members and the superintendent will generally not respond to comments or questions during public comment. If you want to follow up from the board office, please contact Roseanne Powell, the board manager, over here. Guidelines for public input emphasize respect and consideration of others. Complaints about individual employees should be directed to the superintendent's office as a personnel matter. If you have additional materials or items you'd like to provide to the board or superintendent, we ask that you give them to Ms. Powell to distribute to us. Requests to make public comment should be made ahead of time by contacting the board office or checking with Ms. Powell prior to the start of the board meeting to see if there are spots available. Once the board meeting has started, we can no longer accept new requests for public comment. Ms. Powell, do we have anyone signed up?
We do. We have 5 students. First is Helen Tuttle and Andrea Manzo.
And as you're making the way to the microphones, I'd like to remind you of the guidelines for public comment. You have a total of 3 minutes to share your comments. Please begin by stating your name and spelling your last name for the record. During the first 2 minutes of the testimony, a green light will appear. When you have 1 minute remaining, a yellow light will go on, and when your time is up, the red light will go on and a buzzer will sound. We respectfully ask that you conclude your comments at that time. We appreciate your input and thank you for your cooperation. Go ahead.
Hello, my name is Helen Ingram, I-N-G-R-A-H-A-M, Tuttle, T-U-T-T-L-E, and I'm a senior at Roosevelt High School. Today I'm here to speak about the inclusion of LGBTQ history into the standard high school curriculum, high school social studies curriculum. So I've been a PPS student my whole life, and about a year ago I began to notice a gap in the curriculum around the contributions and history of the LGBTQ community. It simply did not seem to be taught. This detail is really relevant to me. As an active member of the Portland LGBTQ community, I've heard lots of stories of students that have experienced homophobia or transphobia in this school, and when considered in the larger country's issues, it is especially important as the LGBTQ community is especially vulnerable. For example, a 2017 study conducted by the Human Rights Campaign and the University of Connecticut found that 70% of LGBTQ youth have been bullied for their sexual orientation, and a separate study by the CDC found that LGB students are 3 times more likely to seriously contemplate suicide than their straight peers. There's clearly a problem, and I believe that we should be working on doing all we can to address it. I want to say that I understand and appreciate all that PPS is doing to support the LGBTQ community already. There's good work going on that I've personally been a part of and benefited from, and I believe that what we already have is doing well at creating safe spaces for kids in our schools. And I also know that we can do even more. Including LGBTQ history in classrooms is a clear next step in making our schools safe and welcoming for LGBTQ students. Currently, only 3 states, California, New Jersey, and Illinois, in the country require LGBTQ history to be taught in schools, and should PPS join this movement, it would demonstrate that our education is truly inclusive, and it would send a strong message to LGBTQ students that they're even more fully a part of the conversation and that they have a place at the school. As there are 3 states that have already begun to expand the curriculum, we know that it is possible to do so already, and there are examples of how to successfully begin implementing it. It is also worth noting that I'm not here to request a separate class, simply that we add to the existing curriculum of social studies classes to continue to grow and expand our ideas of what constitutes as history. The PPS mission statement states that our goal is to educate all children to be responsible citizens who value the richness of diversity. And I've noticed this really come to fruition, how we're constantly expanding our curriculums to reflect the true reality of the world. And I hope that as we continue to create a more diverse teaching of history, LGBTQ people are included and represented as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next is Andrea Manzo and Gabe Steele-Puma.
My name is Andrea Manzo. I'm a senior at Roosevelt High School. In January of 2019, I sat in on a focus group for ESL students arranged by Roosevelt staff, where the ESL director, Veronica Magallanes, came to listen to the questions, concerns, and feedback from ESL students and teachers about the changes for the 2019-2020 school year at Roosevelt and other high schools. The ESL Department Office of Teaching and Learning has created a new policy for the coming year that allows only 1 year of sheltered language arts, history, and science for all newcomer students who have had an uninterrupted formal education before they arrived to the United States. English learning students at Roosevelt have had access to sheltered instruction in language arts ranging from ranging from 2 to 3 years. These courses have counted towards their credits needed for graduation. They have also had access to sheltered instruction in history, science, and math for 1 year, and in some years, sheltered health. Through these classes, English learning students have been able to receive grade-level content while additionally receiving support to learn English. During the arranged focus group with Veronica Magallanes, the input from the students and teachers was ignored. They all clearly expressed how 1 year is not enough for newcomer students to learn English and be included in mainstream classes. Although they shared their opinion, PPS continued this policy, ignoring what the Roosevelt students and teachers had to say. As a Roosevelt community, we treat each other as family. We are students who care about the quality of education of our peers. At Roosevelt, we practice equity in every classroom and expect that every student is offered the amount of support they need in order to succeed. However, our own ESL students and teachers expressed how this new policy is taking away courses that are supportive to all ESL students.
Hello, my name is Gabriel Steele Puma, STEELE-PUMA, and I'm a senior at Roosevelt High School. When we knew about the unfairness of this new policy and how it would affect our ESL peers, we decided to meet with the ESL director, Veronica Magallanes, to receive more information about the policy change. The purpose of the interview was to look for information on the change of the ESL program in the 2019-2020 school year. During this interview, we learned about the SIFE program that serves students who have an interrupted formal education. While we were there, Gretchen Schlag, who is from Humanitarians and oversees core programs, said, and I quote, "I was in ELD for the past 13 years. With those programs, we called it front-loading, because if you think about someone coming here at such an advanced age, 13, 14, 15, 16, and 17, the most essential thing is to get English as high as possible, as fast as possible, so they can join the core classes. So that first year, you're front-loading the basics of English, ramping as fast as you can, and if you think, if I went to a Spanish-speaking country and my Spanish isn't even that good, and if I went and took physics, I probably wouldn't be able to do that until my Spanish got better, even with my educational background," end quote. This contradicts PPS's new plan for ESL because, as you heard from a highly placed PPS representative, she would need a year of front-loading to even attempt a full mainstream class. How do we expect newcomer students who have an uninterrupted formal education to take a non-sheltered math class? No matter the amount of background education one has, we cannot expect a student who does not know the English language to take a math class that is mainstream and comprehend an English-speaking teacher. In addition, if front-loading is critical for students who is learning English, then why is PPS reducing the amount of front-loading students receive? ESL students have a graduation rate 10% lower than all students. This is not only newcomer students, but all ESL. If the policy PPS has now, which offers more sheltered instruction, is failing the ESL students, what do we expect from a new policy that cuts down the amount of support an ESL student needs? To make matters worse, the district will not add new supports for tutoring, new support classes, new training for teachers, or hiring more bilingual assistants. What does PPS think happen if ESL students are having necessary resources taken away with no new supports that are known of ESL students? We ask that you suspend these new policies for a year, allow Roosevelt to continue our existing program of sheltered courses for the coming school year, and revise the newcomer guide with the true inclusion of input from Roosevelt ESL teachers and students. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have Kaya Yonamine and Saria Chinam.
Before we begin, I would like to have a few students deliver the resolution that we're going to be talking about today. My name is Kaya Yonamine, KaiyaYonamine, and I am a junior. This past spring break, I went back to my family's home islands of Okinawa to witness the destruction of our beautiful, sparkling ocean and vibrant coral reefs against the will of our own indigenous people. As cement blocks continue to crush our sea life and our elders stage die-ins in the streets to stop the chaos unfold before our eyes, I returned to my high school to find nothing in our curriculum even mention climate change and climate justice.
We don't learn about the increasing typhoons in the Pacific, destroying backyards, graves, and whole schools. We don't learn about how they've installed signs on every block of my family's homeland to mark how many feet above sea level we are in case a tsunami potentially wipes us out. We don't even learn about the Pacific Climate Warriors and what they've done to block the coal ships that contribute to the destruction of our island's identity and culture. As a Pacific Islander student at Roosevelt High School, I know that not only is it wrong to not learn about such a pressing issue, but also that certain schools, specifically the ones with more historically students of color, are given the shorthand when it comes to access to this kind of necessary education. The PPS education equity policy states that the district shall provide every student with equitable access to high quality and culturally relevant instruction and curriculum. If we as a district are going to uphold these rights to just education for us students, this curriculum is essential to understand an issue that deeply affects the lives of many students in PPS, including me, my friends, and our communities. The sad thing is, I wouldn't know anything about climate change to this extent if my community and my roots weren't directly tied to it. In 2016, students from my high school were in the same spot that I am right now, when the board voted unanimously to pass Resolution 5272. 3 years ago, we were standing here taking pictures with all the board members. 3 years ago, everyone was beaming with pride and finally get to learn about something that truly hit home. And 3 years later, we are back, fighting for our right to learn about something we have needed for a while now. I want you to recognize that with this resolution, we are already behind. Climate change is real and it's happening now. And my generation will be the one that has to fight against it for the rest of our lives. As students whose voices need to be heard, we have come back to demand that you keep your promise, not just to me, but to all of us. We need climate justice education now. Thank you.
My name is Shreya Chinnam, Chinnam. Before I start, I would like to ask everyone to take a moment of silence for 10 seconds to honor and acknowledge people from Puerto Rico, the Marshall Islands, New Orleans, Native American communities, and any other life affected by the impacts of climate change, including every single person sitting in this room today. We are facing a crisis. 97% of scientists agree that there is an ecological crisis. There is no scientific debate when we talk about global warming. PPS understands climate change, but does not recognize that this is a climate crisis. 21.5 million immigrants are already paying the price of the harsh impacts resulting from the climate crisis. Imagine 1 billion climate refugees. I will be 49 when that is happening. Climate justice education is more than climate change. This is not just a science issue. This is about our lives. This is a social justice issue, a racial justice issue. This is not an elitist issue. This is a quality of life issue. Lincoln is the most economically and racially privileged schools in the PPS district. We have an environmental justice class that students can choose to take. On March 15th, 700 students from Lincoln had the privilege to walk out of school and participate in the global climate strike. Students from other PPS schools that are more racially and economically diverse were blocked from walking out of their schools and faced harsher consequences. What does that say about the equity in PPS? We are facing a global crisis. This is affecting us now. We don't have time to waste. We have waited 3 years for the implementation of this resolution. PPS must be held accountable for their inaction. Climate literacy curriculums already exist, but we are choosing to stay stagnant during this crisis if the school board does not act immediately. This curriculum will directly affect every single student in this room, as it will be implemented in the 2019 to 2020 school year. We demand that the school board not risk our future. I'm here in response to the inaction of our district. We demand that the superintendent email all PPS teachers and administration about resolution number 5272, informing them that this curriculum will be a part of the 2019-2020 school year. We also demand that the school board responds by May 21st with an update regarding the progress of implementing climate literacy programs into curriculums. This must be followed by monthly updates until the curriculum is a part of all PPS schools. Lastly, I would like to ask the school board to look around this room. I see students that care about their future. Each and every one of these kids has made a sacrifice to be here. We should not be here right now. We should be playing a sport, being outside, doing our homework, engaging with our peers, spending time with our family. We should not be at our district office demanding for something that should have been in our curriculum 3 years ago. Knowledge is power. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next we have Tim Swinehart and Holly Groom.
Good evening, members of the board, Superintendent Guerrero. I'm not really sure why I'm here. I think it's kind of, I don't really need to be here. I was thinking about just ceding my time because there's not really anything that I can say. Kind of realized this. I told Director Rosen on the way in. It was just kind of occurred to me. This says everything right here, right? But I did prepare some remarks, so I'll go ahead and share them. So I'm here. My name's Tim Swinehart. I offer testimony tonight as a social studies teacher at Lincoln High School, as a member of the PPS Climate Justice Committee, and as a proud father of 2 daughters, one of who's sitting right here behind me, who are finishing kindergarten and 3rd grade at Glencoe Elementary. 3 years ago, almost to the day, many of us gathered at Madison High School to listen to the testimony in favor of Resolution 5272 and celebrate the unanimous passage of that resolution. It was at that point in time, and still is, the most comprehensive climate literacy and climate justice policy in the country. We stood at that time poised to show national leadership on climate justice education. We knew that the hard work, though, was ahead in implementation. We could not have imagined, though, at that point, that 3 years later on a sunny Friday in March, that students would be occupying the parking lot here at this building, demanding a full and equitable implementation of a resolution long overdue. It does seem that students have finally gained the attention of district leadership. And I'd like to acknowledge and thank Superintendent Guerrero for his engagement with students over this last week regarding their demands for bold and comprehensive climate justice education in PPS. Your commitment to working with students, Superintendent Guerrero, and the Climate Justice Committee to move this urgent work forward is welcome. What would bold comprehensive climate justice education look like in PPS? This was the question that guided a gathering of students just 1 month ago, attended by 50 students from across the district and several members of the Climate Justice Committee. The implementation plan that you're receiving tonight, that the students passed out, grew out of this student meeting of 50 students. It was reviewed by another group of 50 teachers on April 25th. It includes demands that all PPS students have access to meaningful and interdisciplinary climate change curriculum, that teachers and administrators receive robust climate justice training and professional development, that the district supports a student climate justice advisory committee, and youth summits, that PPS seeks out and develops partnerships with frontline community organizations to inform and guide climate justice curriculum work and professional development, and that PPS administrators support the activism and leadership so brilliantly displayed by student organizers in the last few weeks and seen here tonight. We would like to ask the board to participate in this process as well, in your capacity as an oversight board. And so it seems prudent that the board continues to provide active oversight of the implementation process in these demands that are laid out here. This includes, I think, reconsidering the budget proposal that was given to the Office of Teaching and Learning by the Climate Justice Committee that has been denied at this point by the Office of Teaching and Learning, but I think is probably worth reconsidering. This includes a summer curriculum camp devoted exclusively to climate justice curriculum called for this summer, the development of a curriculum of a climate justice website, and a full-time TOSA to support this immediate implementation, the full and equitable implementation of this resolution. To conclude, this implementation plan that you're receiving tonight is bold, it's comprehensive, and it demands that the district commit substantial energy and funds to climate justice education. In other words, it's exactly what we need and what students deserve in the midst of a planetary climate emergency. And it's also what sort of sets us up to kind of become the national leaders in this that I think we can become. In the words of Greta Thunberg, the founder of the global student climate strike movement that has so inspired so many of our students here, our house is on fire. Let's start acting like it. Let's not put this off a moment longer. Let's commit today to a full and equitable implementation of Resolution 52. Become the national leader in climate justice education that we stand poised to become, and finally provide our students the education they need to meet this moment in history. Thank you.
Chair, permission to speak?
Please.
Thank you for recognizing. Ordinarily, it isn't protocol to respond to or address items that are actually raised in public comment, but tonight, however, I think it's a rare exception. Primarily because of the incredible presence of so many students here this evening. Your strong presence, both here this evening, on other occasions, and on your recent local strike, are exactly the kind of youth leadership on real-world issues that we as educators always hope for. I understand that you're here to reiterate the expectation that the school district implement what I believe is a landmark resolution. I wasn't here when it was crafted, but Resolution 5272, I believe, is an important direction regarding our students' need to learn about this important topic. I'd like to share just a few excerpts from a letter that I distributed to student leaders following a meeting with them this past week. I came away from that impromptu meeting impressed, not just by the energy and ability to organize, but inspired by the bold leadership for change, and excited by your commitment to addressing pervasive environmental injustices, including the proliferation of climate changes, which have disproportionately impacted communities of color and low-income communities. Like you, I feel the urgent need to act now so that our present and future generations can live and thrive on our planet. I'm humbled by the worldwide youth leadership on this topic of human-caused destruction of the environment, and I also share the perspective that we must follow the lead of frontline communities disproportionately impacted by climate change on how to address this issue. There's clearly a lot more that we can continue to learn about climate justice. A part of that learning is my commitment to supporting you, not only in bringing greater attention to the impact of climate change, but more importantly, joining you in developing and applying the right tools and strategies to effect positive change on the planet. I have directed our staff to provide an update on our work to implement Resolution 5272 to date and an introduction to a roadmap for future actions. And so while we've made some progress in some of these areas, there's much more work to do. Our commitment is to support the outcomes set forth in the resolution, the creation of a plan, which includes the evaluation of our science and social studies textbooks. Some of you might have noticed on your way in today a bunch of very large displays at the back of the room. They are part of a community installation that was at the OMSI this weekend, inviting the community to comment on a year's worth of work which community stakeholders engaged in that described and constructed a vision for Portland Public Schools, and specifically for the kinds of skills and dispositions we believe our graduates should have as a result of their time in PPS. This vision will articulate a commitment to ensuring that students graduating from PPS are prepared to serve as global ambassadors who are responsible stewards of the environment and have deep knowledge about climate justice issues. I am quoting directly from the emerging vision, which community stakeholders, parents, and students in particular emphasize that we pay attention to. At PPS, under my leadership and this new administration, we're committed to doing better on this important topic. This includes accelerating planning and implementation of Resolution 5272. I want to reiterate what I stated in our dialogue earlier this week. I strongly believe that Portland can be a global leader on climate justice. And as your superintendent, I affirm that your right for a better, safer, healthier environment is urgent, timely, and one that will change the course of history. I expect in a short amount of time that we be able to reflect back on a great deal of progress that I believe we will be making on this topic. Thank you for coming here this evening.
Madam Chair. Just from the board perspective, first of all, I want to thank all the students for coming. We have two requests from the students. I would like to ask that from the board perspective, we provide some sort of response to them per their request so that they know we've heard them. I think that this is an issue that the board has had a discussion about, but it would be good for us to respond to their request since it was a board passed resolution. I also want to recognize Director Rosen, because I know that on a monthly basis, you raised this issue about the implementation. You were a principal player in the crafting of it and stewarding it through. So I want to just recognize that, but I do think as a board we should respond to the students' requests. Do you have a suggestion? Maybe not to volunteer Director Rosen, but maybe have Director Rosen draft something for the rest of the board to consider. Sorry to volunteer you, but you've been a climate warrior, Mike, and hope you don't mind.
I'm happy to do it, and I want to thank all the students, the teachers, the community members that have been working on this for at least 3 years, but many years before that, and having the courage to come here tonight and demand what's needed. And I look forward to helping push this along. Thank you.
Okay, thank you all for showing up.
Quickly, briefly one more time and want to thank the students at Cleveland. I was able to catch an hour of the session last week where students did TED Talks on climate change issues and also prepared some lesson plans, which were really thoughtfully done. And it was great to see that in action.
And I also just wanted to mention to the students, yes, thank you all for coming and for all of you testifying on the topics that you did. So we're listening not only about the climate change, but all of the other topics, students, that you discussed tonight. Believe me, we are listening. So thank you for taking your time and coming here and speaking to us. Thank you.
Okay, thank you all for your advocacy. You're going to have to deal with what my generation bequeathed to you, and for that I am sorry. And we need you to push us.
We're still alive, though. Our generation is still here. We can make it happen.
Yep. Well,
we will.
We can certainly help, but I think you're the ones who are going to have to make it happen. You're doing it right now. And thank you for all of your work to date, and I think we're all looking forward to making some more progress on getting this curriculum going and in the schools and creating a generation of climate warriors to save us all. So thank you. Okay, I think we're going to move on to the rest of public comment. Ms. Powell?
Yes. Next we have Holly Groom and Laura Moulton.
Okay, maybe we should take a 5-minute recess while people exit the room.
Pardon me, there is food upstairs.
Okay, we are going to reconvene with the rest of public comment. Ms. Powell, who's up next?
Next, we have Holly Groom and Laura Moulton. And next we have Laura Hall and Yana Gevodikov.
Hi, my name is Laura Hall. My daughter Alice starts kindergarten at Chief Joe next fall. My son Henry will go there in a few years. I work for the Regional Disaster Preparedness Organization, which is housed within the Portland Bureau of Emergency Management. I'm also a team leader for the Portland Neighborhood Emergency Team Program, and I'm a report writer for the Oregon Seismic Safety Policy Advisory Commission. But today I'm here as co-chair of a group called Parents for Preparedness. We call ourselves P4P. P4P is a group of parents, school staff, and community members who are working to help prepare schools for a major earthquake. Our group started a few years ago with 2 concerned parents in a coffee shop, and now we have over 180 parents and community members involved, representing over 50 schools. We are seeing very rapid growth as our community becomes more aware of the risks that our children face. You may have heard our best scientists tell us there is a 40% chance that our region will experience a major earthquake in the next 50 years, and that earthquake has the potential to devastate areas of the Pacific Northwest. Here in Portland, we expect unreinforced masonry buildings and other fragile buildings to fail, which means to collapse or partially collapse. Even in more modern buildings, we expect glass to break, furniture, objects, and debris to fall on people. Cell service and internet will go out, and utilities will stop working for an unknown amount of time. Several of our bridges will collapse, and many people will be stuck wherever they are for several hours or days. P4P works with parents who are concerned about this. We share what we've learned with each other about doing preparedness work in schools. We talk about improving earthquake drills, strapping and rearranging furniture to make classrooms safer, doing school reunification drills to ensure that staff know what to do and parents are motivated to think about their plans, and storing supplies that will help school staff care for themselves and our children if we can't get to them quickly. Our goal is to be productive. We don't want to blame individuals or schools or the district for what has not been done. When a new parent joins us and they ask us why aren't schools doing more to prepare, we explain that it's complicated. It's a complicated past and a complicated present, and we encourage them to join us in focusing on how we can creatively work together with each other, our school staff, and the district to make our schools safer. We've formed a strong partnership with PPS Director of Security Molly Emmons and Emergency Manager Kyle Olson, and that relationship has been very productive and positive and mutually beneficial. We frequently encounter people, including teachers and administrators, who are not concerned about this earthquake. They either don't know about it or don't think that it will happen in their lifetime, or they worry about it, but they have many other things to worry about that feel much more immediate. But the Cascadia subduction zone earthquake is coming, as are countless other disasters such as drought, flooding, and fire caused by climate crisis. P4P members believe that schools play a very key role in disaster awareness and preparation. And as parents, we put a great deal of hope and expectations in their ability to respond. We have a number of really great ideas that we would like to share with you. They are cost effective and have the potential to make a huge impact, and we would like to meet with you to talk about that. We have, in addition to our ideas, lots of connections and influence with Multnomah County, Portland Bureau of Emergency Management, Mercy Corps, and other government and non-government agencies. And before I go, I would like to point out something really critical here, which might not be obvious. Our members represent schools with racial, economic, and cultural privilege. There are many schools in Portland where there are no parent volunteers working on this preparedness effort, and this is a major equity issue. The reason I'm talking to you today is because our ideas for school safety have the potential to impact all PPS schools, not just those with parents who have time, resources, and cultural capital to volunteer. I would like to request an opportunity to talk with you more, and I thank you for your time.
My name is Diana, and I'm one of the parents of Russian immersion students in Kelly Elementary School. Today, we're here to express our appreciation as a community for today's response from Dr. Ivan Curtis that PPS considered our request to add back to second Russian immersion kindergarten classroom at Kelly Elementary School. Dr. Curtis states in her letter that the district has decided that they will add back a second Russian immersion kindergarten class if we have 31 additional kindergarten students enrolled by Friday, August 16, 2019. Although we appreciate this change in decision and opening the doors of access and opportunity to the Russian-speaking minority of the Portland metro area, we're not sure what this means. As for right now, we have 61 applicants. 26 are from Portland Public School and 35 interested out-of-district applicants, including 14 siblings of current enrolled students. Dr. Curtis asserts that PPS will make every effort to accept siblings of current out-of-district students in the program. This statement appears to be promising, but with the summer break around the corner, the opening of the second kindergarten class is still at risk. According to the staffing document released by the district, kindergarten class size is 15 to 28 students. Why is this different for Russian immersion classes? Can we agree on a set number of students for Russian immersion for keeping 2 strands every year as 40 to 42 students? In the PPS Racial Equity and Social Justice statements, Guadalupe Guerrero asserts that PPS must foster and promote a collective vision for public education so that every student, regardless of race, gender, socioeconomic situation, special needs, or ability, has access and opportunity to kindle his or her unique spark and to build knowledge and skills to achieve their goal. Although today's decision appears to express PPS commitment to racial equity and social justice, the future of 2 strands of kindergarten remains uncertain, as every year we have to face the same uncertainty that creates a lot of additional stress on the community, adds to anxiety, and undermines trust. The Russian immersion program is our only hope and dream for our children to have access to build the knowledge and skills. First of all, we're here today to ask the board to develop a long-term plan that can help to promote Russian immersion program equitably. We would like the board to be aware that our language immersion schools and Portland Public Schools held 2 kindergarten connect events at the school before the in-district lottery ended, while Kelly Elementary School only held 1 kindergarten connect event before the end of the in-district lottery. The second connect on April 29 was too late to allow in-district families to apply. With half the promotion other program received, it's not surprising that enrollment was less than what it could have been, but the lack of promotion does limit access and opportunity. Secondly, we insist that the decision about the program be made in collaboration with parents and community members. In the past 3 years, decision-making took place without community input, without any invitation to collaborate or engage in the future of the program. We welcome Dr. Curtis's suggestion to work with Jonathan Garcia, Portland Public Schools Chief of Engagement and Strategic Partnership, to assist with community engagement in community building for the entire Kelly community. How should we believe that PPS really intends to engage in opportunity to support the broader Russian-speaking community across the region when no long-term plans are being made to strengthen the program? Why, for instance, are Spanish immersion program being built out across the city while the Russian immersion program, already marginalized to a far corner of the district, is constantly targeted for further costs? Why doesn't Russian immersion have a different location in the city? PPS needs to begin to engage with the Russian community equitably and in good faith. Finally, we appreciate that Dr. Curtis is now considering the impact on the community of closing 1 kindergarten class, and we support her consideration. Today, we ask you to collaborate with us in order to develop a specific and actionable long-term plan to strengthen the Russian immersion program across the city. Thank you.
Thank you.
Lastly, we have Alicia Barduk.
Good evening. Do I need to push a button? No? Okay. All right. Dear ladies and gentlemen of the school board, oh, I should announce myself, right? Okay, my last name is Bordug, B-O-R-D-I-O-U-G, and I teach 5th grade Russian immersion in Kelly Elementary. Dear ladies and gentlemen of the school board and Superintendent Guerrero, we, the teachers of the Russian immersion program at Kelly Elementary, are proud to be a part of the PPS national leadership role in promoting dual language immersion in public schools, thus providing students with access and opportunity. We completely support the PPS's focus on closing the achievement gap for historically underserved students. The PPS's disregard and disbelief that the Russian-speaking community is a legitimate minority continues to be a leading obstacle in addressing the needs of this historically underserved and disadvantaged community. Every year, the Russian-speaking community faces the uncertainty of whether the program will have two strands or not. This threatens to weaken PPS's commitment to equity and support for a historically underserved community. Keeping this second strand is essential to sustain the program through middle and high schools. Therefore, we ask the board to develop a plan that is supportive of the program and ensures the timely and equitable promotion of the Russian immersion program to PPS families to have two strands. The communication to parents and community often state that the reason for limited ability to receive interested families is due to low numbers of in-district families combined with an ability to receive large numbers. Well, at Kelly, there is enough space capacity to host two strands. The changes to the open enrollment in Oregon is also often cited as the reason for the PPS's limited ability. However, there is inter-district transfer, and there is another way to admit interested students. In our letter to the board from February 14th, 2017, we asked the board to consider whether it is really justified to claim a lack of interest in the program, given that it was placed at the furthest corner of the school district in Southeast Portland. It is unfortunate that the school district has, despite that warning, made no long-term plan to make the Russian program more accessible to the broader Russian-speaking population in PPS. The Russian immersion program and the Russian-speaking community should not be denied access and opportunity to education because of the district's failure to prepare. We therefore once again appeal to the board to consider additional location for the Russian immersion program in PPS. While other immersion language programs are either centrally located or spread across the district in several locations, the Russian immersion has been relegated to a far corner of the district. Every year, the Russian-speaking community deals with uncertainty around continued access to the program. Attempts to close one strand of kindergarten sends the unsettling message to the Slavic minority of the greater Portland area that it is not welcome, not worthy of inclusion, and is not part of diverse culture of PPS. So we ask the PPS board to determine the number of students that can be accepted from outside of the district to keep the two strands. And furthermore, we also want to ask the board to create a committee to develop a long-term plan to support the Russian immersion program, including opening an additional, more central location. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Superintendent Guerrero, did you want to?
Thank you, Chair. I just want to make sure, thank you parents for coming here this evening. I think there's a need to clarify information or maybe understand updated information. And I'm also sensitive to the fact for families that do not reside in Portland Public School boundaries that the time is urgent for those interested in pursuing inter-district transfer. So if for those that are interested, if I could ask a representative group of family members, we'd be happy to have Deputy Superintendent Curtis, our Chief Engagement Officer Garcia, and our CAO Valentino to have a brief conversation, maybe in an adjoining conference room to try to clear up that information because I believe time is of the essence. So. Right, so for that reason, we want to make that opportunity available this evening. If there's a group of representative parents who would like to meet with senior leadership, I'd like us to clear up that information this evening. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you, everyone, for your comments. We'd like to move on to the next agenda item, the Community Budget Review Committee report. I'd like to ask Sarah Kerr and Harmony Quiroz, co-chairs of the CBRC, to come up and deliver your reports.
We thought everybody came for us. I know. Thanks, Jenny.
Glad you're all right.
Good evening. My name is Harmony Quiroz. This is Sarah Kerr. We are the co-chairs of, we are this year's co-chairs of the Community Budget Review Committee. Before we deliver our two reports, we'd like to also thank the other members of the committee who joined us this evening, and I'm going to make you stand up.
Acknowledged.
Roger Kirshner, Betsy Salter, Judah McCauley, Thomas Lanham, and Danny Oates.
Thank you.
I'm going to start with the local option levy report. Instead of reading it in specific detail, I just want to highlight a few key points. First, we have found that the district, using the special finance tools, has spent all of the money for 2017-2018 as directed by depositing the money into the sub-account. As of May 6th, 2019, the district has received a $93,342,239, which equates to about 870 teachers for the 2018-2019 year. We'll acknowledge that the cost of a teacher went up just slightly over last year. We funded about 790 teachers last year with local option levy funds. We'd also like to highlight a difference in this year's report. The district has very graciously and in the eye of transparency put together a list of by school how many teachers are funded by the local option compared to how many teachers are funded by the general fund as a whole. That's appended to our local option levy report for your information and for the communities as well. The last thing we'd like to highlight is that the local option levy is back to a vote this year, and we are so grateful to our community as a whole for continuing to support these important funds and that very much reduce class sizes and improve the experience of all of our students. And we would encourage the board to consider raising the rate of the levy at the next, when it comes to a vote in the fall. There is room before we have to start turning money back to the state school fund, so we'd like the board to take into careful consideration what raising the rate might, how that might work, and we would encourage them to do so.
And I'll just add on that point that we understand, thanks to really helpful information from your staff or the PPS staff who've supported the CBRC over the course of this year, that there are plans underway and a lot of good information that's being reviewed that will contribute to the decision that's made. And wanted to just underscore that based on our analysis, it felt like there would be room to consider an increase and encourage that to be taken into consideration. Good. Okay. Again, Sarah Kerr, co-chair of the CBRC this year. It's been a great year, and before we dive into the report, in addition to the CBRC members who are able to join us here tonight, as well as those who are unable to join us in person, I want to acknowledge the budget staff, two of whom are sitting behind me, and many others who devoted quite a bit of their time and attention to supporting the CBRC this year and providing an incredible amount of transparency and support and responsiveness as we reviewed the budget and deliberated over the course of the past school year. So I want to really thank them and acknowledge their commitment. Woohoo! We can clap. Thank you. Okay, so Harmony and I will deliver our report. You, I believe, should all have copies in front of you. So the superintendent's proposed 2019-20 budget will decrease overall staffing in schools and cut 2.5% of central office costs to minimize instability in the face of our state legislature's failure to provide even a maintenance level of funding for the 2019-20 school year. And like other vested education stakeholders in this community, we have been closely tracking efforts in Salem to pass landmark revenue reform that would significantly increase K-12 funding in the state of Oregon. And as of the time of this writing, we had not yet had the activities that transpired yesterday, so I will slightly amend our written remarks to say that we are incredibly grateful to the state legislature for fulfilling their obligation to serve students and their communities by passing the proposed $2 billion package just yesterday. While this well overdue investment in Oregon's education system will not go into effect until the second year of the current biennium, it will help the district, PPS, to plan and implement a more stable vision and strategic plan in the 2020-21 school year and beyond, and much of that work is underway and just ready to be implemented and fully funded. CBRC has thoroughly reviewed and evaluated the superintendent's proposed budget with the board-adopted budget principles as our lens. We present our report to the board today with an appreciation for the student and equity-centered approach that the superintendent and his staff have taken in developing this proposed budget. While there are a number of outstanding concerns that our committee has with respect to the proposed 2019-20 budget, as we'll outline below and here tonight, we have reason to believe that this proposal, coupled with new revenue expected in 2021, in the 2020-2021 school year, will lead to more equitable opportunities and ultimately improved outcomes for PPS students.
Despite having to cut $17 million from an already lean budget, CBRC has found a number of positive elements in the superintendent's proposed budget. Most notably, targeted funding for historically underserved students and schools, follow through on district leaders' commitment not to balance the budget on the backs of students and teachers by focusing cuts on central office and other operational expenses, and increased transparency in the development of the budget and the budget book itself. It should also be noted that CBRC is encouraged by the depth of expertise and commitment that the new budget staff brings to PPS. Lack of stability among prior budget staff has in the past hindered our ability to fully understand and evaluate the district's budget. CBRC acknowledges the damaging effects of insufficient state funding and its impact on the 2019-20 budget. We also recognize the continuing benefit of the resident-supported local option levy, which provides critically important funding for more than 800 teachers per year in PPS and offsets even deeper cuts. We support increased district investment in special education services, differentiated school supports, curricular reform, targeted funding aimed at maintaining the lower staffing ratios in schools identified for comprehensive school improvement, CSIs, targeted school improvement, TSIs, and Title I schools. Prioritization of student health and safety with $1 million in new facilities investments, and also critical information technology one-time investments. We commend the superintendent and the district for balancing the budget in a cuts environment by focusing on an equity and student-oriented process when making challenging, if not impossible, decisions. It should be noted that there has been a great deal of blame for our underfunded schools placed on public school teachers who receive public employees' retirement system benefits. PPS perpetuates this information by alleging that the increase in PERS is why we're budgeting for a $17 million loss this coming school year, when in fact this is not the case. Not only is the underfunding the result of a failure on the state's part to have a contingency plan for the increasing cause of PERS, but it is misleading when state and local government employees are also eligible members of PERS. Funding our public schools and funding PERS are two separate conversations, and neither should be held responsible for the state's inability to properly fund the other.
On the topic of equity, CBRC acknowledges, is this on? Yes. Okay, there we go. CBRC acknowledges and supports the district's use of the racial equity, social justice lens in the development of the proposed budget, and we had an opportunity as a committee to learn more about that lens. We fully support preserving and in some cases increasing spending in historically underserved Title I schools in the face of budget cuts. CBRC supports the district-developed decision-making process for determining how each school's equity allocation is spent, evaluated, and whether it is in fact achieving the desired outcomes. However, it is still challenging as a public body to understand the extent to which the new staffing model and equity allocations are in fact achieving their desired outcomes, making it difficult to fully evaluate the proposed budget from an equity standpoint. Further, CBRC is concerned that the district's focus on equity may be undermined by the lack of transparency and accountability for independent school foundations. Many schools with independent school foundations are raising significant revenue to further enhance learning experiences and opportunities at their already enriched schools. The impact, unintended or not, is that opportunity and achievement gaps between students attending schools in wealthier communities and their less affluent counterparts are exacerbated, despite the district's efforts to level the playing field. CBRC urges the board to take action to ensure more transparency with respect to fundraising for schools, including but not limited to collecting and reporting all school-level revenue raised via foundations to better understand whether and to what extent it is impacting goals for more equitable spending and outcomes. We also understand that while the 2019-20 proposed budget does not include any new spending on PPS's contract for the district boundary study, the work will continue in the coming year. CBRC urges the board to consider impacts of the study's findings and recommendations on equity spending and goals as they review and approve next year's budget.
On the topic of reserves, in 2016, CBRC presented to the board a revised reserves policy with the goal of increasing unassigned contingency to 5% by 2021 and 10% by 2026. On April 19th, 2017, the board unanimously approved the new reserves policy. Recently, the Policy and Governance Committee has recommended a revision of the policy that changes the long-term goal to a range of 5 to 10%, specifies contingency spending, and removes all goal dates from the policy. CBRC understands the need to delay meeting the 5% goal by 1 year to manage PERS increases and give the district more flexibility to save in the second year of the biennium. However, we are discouraged by the lack of controls in place to ensure the district will meet the original 10% goal. The further weakening of the policy to suggest a range of 5 to 10% seems to disregard the guidance of the Government Finance Officers Association and of the community as a whole. We do not support any change to the existing reserves policy until the board enacts structural controls to meet the 10% goal within the given time frame. We strongly suggest that the board adopt a multi-year financial plan or enact some other form of control for which the community can hold the board and district accountable, particularly given economic forecasting that suggests a recession is a matter of when, not if.
In addition to actively advocating for adequate state funding, it is the responsibility of the district to thoughtfully and transparently use its available resources to best educate its students. We commend the district for producing a more comprehensive and transparent budget book and for reaching out to the community in new formats such as the budget forum and a more accessible budget summary document. The mobilization of students, and in particular students of color, to advocate changes to PPS's proposed budget for school resource officers this past year highlights for us the importance of student voice, even more I should say, than we already felt, the importance of student voice and agency in determining needs and identifying barriers to their own success. CBRC strongly recommends that the district more intentionally, consistently, and authentically seek out opportunities to engage students, particularly historically underserved students, in the budget planning and development process. And I think as we've seen tonight, there's quite a bit of excellence out there in terms of students and student voice that we can be tapping into. CBRC is hopeful, that's still my part. CBRC is hopeful that the forthcoming completion of the district's visioning process and strategic plan will be a starting point for addressing many of the existing inequities in the district. Until the vision is approved by the board and available to the public, and there is a clear plan for implementation and measurement of impact in place, we ask that the board fully and carefully consider the concerns and requests we have made before adopting the budget. And we are happy to respectfully submit this report on behalf of our committee members and are very happy to take any comments or questions that you have.
Thank you. Thank you for all the work that went into it. I know it's quite a lot of work.
Been there.
It's much appreciated. Any questions from the board?
Yep, I've got a couple. And just a comment. So thank you to all the members of the committee. I know that you've been meeting on a regular basis and really appreciate getting additional perspectives and eyes on the proposed budget. So thank you very much. You also have a special responsibility in terms of looking at the local option dollars. So I know you're sort of the independent community review. And so I guess just for the record, I want to ask that when you reviewed the district's expenditures, the local option funds, that you found that they'd been spent as had been promised to the voters?
Yes.
So all for
Yes.
teachers?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yes.
Great.
Yes.
Thank you for the
Yes.
confirmation. And then I wanted to ask about the proposal that you made of raising the rate of the levy. So are you proposing a specific amount up to the cap, or what is?
So in our limited research, we looked at rates of, the current rate is $1.99, suggesting a rate of $2.25 would probably be the highest the district could go. The limit at which it affects our state school fund receipts is about $117 million. At $2.25, we'd bring in about $109 million, about $10 million more, about $10 million more than we do now, which is about 100 teachers a year, which is a significant amount.
So was there any discussion, thank you, was there any discussion in the committee about just sort of the overall tax burden on, and I don't say, it's kind of probably the wrong word, burden, because I think Portland voters have been very generous. But because in Portland we have the art tax, housing, children's levy, the historical society, by the way, paying for the whole state, and a whole host of other things that are already on the property tax, and then a pretty significant increase in our bond, a step up last time. So I'm wondering if there was a discussion about that. And I know the Metro Council is looking at a potential huge addition to putting something else onto the property tax. So just the impact that has on affordability of housing and the cost of housing in the city.
Yeah. I can start, and then Harmony, you should add. I mean, we absolutely had discussions about more holistically what the average Portland citizen was facing in terms of tax burden, to borrow your word, and just
don't repeat it.
The realities that we're in. It's
Not the right
probably
one.
not the best one I'll use. And we also had conversations in the context of the recent at the time we had the conversations, the legislation hadn't passed, the state funding. So we did have conversations about sort of the realities and challenges and potential tensions of asking local voters to, raise even more revenue in light of the new funding that was coming in. But I think based on the very brief and imperfect analysis and data we had available to us, and sort of the historical willingness and support that Portland residents have put towards passing these levies or the bonds we felt that there was reason to believe that there wouldn't be concern this time around. But we understand there's lots more activity going on, including polling, to understand where the voters are on this particular issue, that seem wise to take into consideration that we did not have available to us.
I think it's important to also note the local option levy is a very clear measure of its impact is very clearly measured in teachers in schools. And I think the district's done a good job this year of breaking that out even further so that parents and community members can see how it affects their specific schools, the school their kid is in, the schools that the neighborhood students are in, and how many teachers are provided by those levy funds. And adding an additional 100 teachers, and it is spent entirely on teachers, as you can see in the breakdown, I think is a very dynamic and compelling argument that isn't always heard in comparison to some of the other taxes that people pay. It's not as clear where that money goes, how it affects them locally and directly. And again, we understand that the burden is that asking local individuals to pay more is a big ask, but that there is a direct and very real need that Portland faces, that Oregon faces in the wake of funding. We are seeing new funding from the state. It doesn't reach the quality education model, which is still only a baseline of funding. If we want quality experiences for our students, it will take more money and more resources and more teachers.
So, thank you. And I don't know if you're meeting again or if this is it.
No, we have been
okay.
meeting.
Because I actually think this is a great topic for a citizens group to sort of share their thinking with the board and the district on, because I think the bill has passed now, and it's approximately $80 million. Where's Claire? I think it's approximately
40.
Yeah.
For 40 million per year.
So, and I also think about the testimony we had earlier from the parents regarding seismic upgrades, and I can't imagine that our bond is going to be less next time. And again, while it may be an easier sell because we can clearly identify the teachers that it goes to, I think most taxpayers look at what they overall are paying to PPS, and I just think we should keep that into consideration as we think about, and be interested in CBRC's thinking about it, about the overall amount and the balance between capital and the really needed capital improvements we need to make across the city, and we're way behind on those, and then how that balances out on the teacher side. If we were to add, I'm not at all suggesting not a continuation, but I'm just thinking about that extra increment, and I don't think voters or taxpayers necessarily are going to make the distinction of which bucket it goes into. They have a certain amount of money, and it may limit what we need to do somewhere else. So I think it's worth having a discussion now that we have new information with the state.
Yeah, I think we discussed quite a bit about trying to identify like an average amount of like a Portland homeowner would pay, and which is a very difficult calculation to make, right? Like, what's that additional amount? Very different depending on where you live in the city.
When you bought your house.
Right. When you bought your house, real market value, all of those components. We still felt like that there was room and space, and obviously balanced against a possible need for a higher bond level and things like that certainly need to be taken into consideration. I think it's something I think the other thing to note is the local option levy has always been a very clearly, it's been easy to hold the district accountable for how those dollars have been spent, which hasn't always been true necessarily on the other taxes that community members pay. And I think when a campaign is raised around the local option levy, that's an easier sell to the voters about what you're asking for and the difference it makes in this district.
That's right.
Yeah, I just want to clarify, did you say you don't expect the bond amount to go down next time, or the tax rate?
I don't expect the next bond to be less than $790 million. Just given the vast need we have. I don't expect us to put a bond for a lesser amount on the board, just my own personal opinion.
Okay, so that would be, because our current bonds have tails, that would be a considerable increase in the tax rate. I'm not, and we've seen other plans, so I just want to.
Yeah, I think it's higher. I think it's higher already. People always, I think, vote, and then when they get their tax statement, whatever it is, I think people always are surprised about how much it is and the PPS portion of it.
Did have a question. If we are lucky enough to actually see more revenue, not next year, but this coming year, but the year after that, would one of your top level suggestions be to work the reserve, increase the reserve?
Yes. I mean, I think that it has to factor into a long-term plan. I think our primary concern is long-term planning and the long-term stability of the budget. We have to always consider that our investments are rarely, if ever, one-time investments, that they have to be sustainable over long-term. Students enter, we're not just funding students' experience one year, but over their career in PPS, and the reserves is the stabilizing fund for that, and its low amount puts that at risk every year.
And again, if we're lucky enough to avoid a recession in the next 2 years, that this is the time of rich when we have an opportunity to put it away for the next cut cycle that we know is
absolutely
coming sometime or other.
Yep. And any other emergencies that could arise.
Unforeseen.
I know, or otherwise.
So I just had a comment, and since there's members of the CBRC here, and Roger Kirshner has been sort of a regular at our policy and governance committee meeting, so he's sort of heard the discussion, but I think it's worth maybe sharing the perspective about the contingency and reserves policy and the proposed changes. I don't think there's any intention to weaken the commitment to reserves. I was on the board in 2002 when the very first reserve policy was put into place, and actually money put in it. In general, it's not best practice to put actual dates in policy because policies should be relatively timeless. It's a statement of your values. So the statement of a range and having reserves and what their purpose is for, and that you're not using your reserves for sort of ongoing operational adds, but more sort of maybe one-time dips or when you have a recession. So the proposed changes weren't at all in an attempt to weaken the policy. There's other places I think we could make that same statement. It's just what you don't want to have to do is every year go back and change the policy because you've got dates in it. So generally, as you do policy work, if there's dates in it, you should be cleaning those out, and you can put things in administrative directives or in the ongoing budget documents. And we've had several conversations with the deputy superintendent for business and operations about where that commitment would reside, so that the community would see that commitment and also be able to hold us accountable. It's just policy is sort of an awkward place. A policy is an awkward place to do it. So maybe we can have a discussion of what, if it's not in the policy, what CBRC would perceive it to be as the place where it is a commitment from the district leadership and the board to those targets and those goals in a place other than policy.
Yeah, I think we're open to any of those controls. I think that the concern is the changing of the policy without simultaneously enacting those controls.
So just as a further discussion point on that, the reason we were making the change in the first place is we need to do something because the budget would not be in compliance with the policy. So that's what instigated the discussion about the policy, and then as long as we were looking at it, it was to try and infuse into the policy sort of best practice. So maybe we can have a discussion about what that would look like and what sort of budget document. I do know that we ideally should either waive the policy or make a change before we adopt the budget, because otherwise the budget will not be in compliance with the policy.
Yeah, and the board has the power to do that, to waive it, and CBRC supports the delay of 1 year and not meeting the 5% by next year. That's not a concern. It's the broader changes, even if they are in compliance with standard best practice. It's not sufficient for us. We've seen you're not all going to be sitting here next year. You're not all going to be sitting here in a few months. So I think it's important for the community to have those controls in place first, or in coinciding with that policy change.
If I can just add, one of the other amendments to the policy that's been proposed is a statement that there will be a multi-year financial plan. So that will be enshrined in the policy, which I think is going to be a substantial improvement in terms of kind of pushing the district in the direction of sustainability and some level of predictability.
Agreed.
So this isn't my question, it's Chair Moore's question, and I think it's a good question to bring up. But
She's like, which one is that question?
it's like being back in grade school, you know, we're passing notes here. If we increase the local option levy, and it's also maybe a question for, I can never remember the titles. Deputy, is it assistant deputy superintendent, deputy superintendent Hertz, around, if we were to go for a higher levy rate, would compression affect that, and so we wouldn't get what we thought we would be getting?
It does have an impact, and we have to do a well, actually, we do have an estimate on what each. It would have an impact, and we do have the calculation that we've shared with the board on what that impact would be.
Yeah, and it's back there somewhere. Okay.
So that, okay, so that's my original
Yeah,
question.
what's your
So
question?
there does, I think there does come a point where even if you increase the rate, the net increase in revenue that we retain is limited by the state imposed maximums.
That's
And-
correct, and that's what they were reporting on earlier, that if you went above the $1.25 and a
If you
quarter.
went above two,
Sorry, two and a quarter.
It's somewhere between 225 and 250 is where you'd hit the barrier for the state school fund amount. I think Director Moore is talking more about the overall, maybe I'm wrong, but I think the overall amount of money we bring in might change because of also like the metro amounts and those types of things, which all contribute to compression. So
Yes.
I think more math needs to be done than we did, or that rather than Deputy Superintendent Hertz shared with us the math around all of those numbers. We just think it's something that the board should take into careful consideration. It may be an opportunity to raise more revenue.
Yeah, and that's correct. It's at least what I am interpreting. It's not the state limit on local
Right.
options. It's the local compression of the, what is it, $1 per thousand for local government and
It's a
50
percent.
cents per thousand for education.
10
per 1,000 for local, 5 for schools.
We got a
Yeah.
tax guy.
Well,
from the-
that was almost what I said.
Yeah.
And there is
What's a
also-
decimal point here and there?
There's also consideration when you approve a levy for 5 years, that making projections over 5 years, you don't want to get so close to the limit that you kick over by mistake.
Okay, any other questions?
Sure.
Conversation. Just real, are we done with that conversation?
Yes.
I don't want to like break it up. Go
ahead.
I just had a quick question. So you mentioned when you were going over the report, the school foundations, about being more transparent. Could you expand on that just a little bit? I'm involved in a couple, so I just want to know what that would mean and what the view is on that.
Sure. You want to jump in, should I? I'm sure we have both have plenty to
Yeah,
say.
I think that it's probably a much longer conversation, but in general, there are lots of different ways that individual schools, as I'm sure you know, are raising revenue that goes to support programming, in some cases staff, in their own schools, and independent school foundations are one mechanism for that local raising of revenue that goes directly to the school. There are mechanisms in place through All Hands Raised that will be transferring over to the school's new, and I'm forgetting the name, the fund at PPS, did I get that right? And so there has been good oversight and resource sharing, et cetera, but through the course of conversations we had as a committee, we acknowledge that the general public doesn't have as much access to transparent information about the amount of revenue that each independent school foundation is currently raising, what it's going to support, the impact of that additional revenue on their ability to offer different kinds of programming and staff, et cetera. And I think in the context of the district's very critical goals around closing opportunity and achievement gaps. As a committee, we just acknowledge that unless and until there's more transparency on this independent school foundation side of things, for revenue that's coming in outside of the school funding formulas, et cetera, that it may offset or serve counter to the equity goals, and that the public, I think, has, it's important, I think, that the public better understand and have access to transparent information about how much money is raised and what it's going to.
I would just add that there are school foundations that are operated independently within the school. There are those operated under the umbrella of All Hands Raised. There are other fundraising mechanisms outside of that as well, PTAs, booster clubs, and others that we have anecdotally heard about. And that all of those different mechanisms to raise money make it very difficult to get a clear picture of the experiences students are having at individual schools compared to schools without those fundraising mechanisms in place. And again, just to echo what Sarah said, in the interest of equity in this racial equity and social justice lens, more information and clarity around that needs to be out there so that better decisions can be made about the management of that money.
So it's worth noting that the Policy and Governance Committee is going to look at the foundation policy. So since the late 90s, the sort of 1/3, 2/3 purchasing teachers has been in the form of like a memo versus in policy, and we're looking at changing that. So if CBRC had some recommendations, as long as they don't have dates in it, on that front in terms of transparency or reporting, we would welcome the ideas because we're just starting the process.
And we'd welcome any information the district has to help us provide ideas. I think there was a general sense within the committee that we didn't even have enough information to make a valid judgment call on what those changes to the memo would be, because we don't know all of that money, we haven't seen all that money, and we don't know the impact that money's having. We can imagine what it is, and there are certainly anecdotal stories everywhere about the differences in experiences as a result of those foundation monies, but we are certainly interested in seeing more data as well.
So this is a great topic, and we share many of CBRC's observations in this realm. Good timing, because next Tuesday, I believe on the agenda is a presentation on the Fund for Portland Public Schools. And so one of the reasons for establishing it is exactly because we want there to be more transparency about that fundraising activity. So next week will be a first opportunity to do that more publicly, for sure.
Yeah. Great.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
And thank you for bringing up the boundary issue, which of course is more than boundaries per se. It also includes focus option review and reconfiguration of schools from K-8s to K-5 and middle. And I understand we're due for our presentation on that on the 28th. Get some information on that. Is there something coming up?
28th is a Tuesday.
Something like that.
Something like that.
Yes,
So,
sometime in the next couple of weeks.
yeah.
Great.
Sometime in the next couple of weeks.
Great.
Stay tuned.
Great. We won't be the only ones waiting for that.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you again for all your work.
And I just wanted to say one thing before we totally close it out. Thank you for the report, and I especially appreciated the highlighting that PERS is not actually an education problem. It is another example of the state's failure to fund its own pension program that the state established. So it's another example of the state's failure to have structural solutions to structural problems. Unfortunately, school district budgets are going to take a big hit every other government agency is also going to take a big hit. And I would endorse some effort on the part of the state to address the unfunded liability, but it cannot come on the backs of state employees who have contracts. So I look forward to that discussion about how we increase revenues so that the state can fulfill all of its responsibilities. I will take every nickel of this, the $2 billion per biennium for early education and K-12, but I don't think anybody should go home thinking, we're done. We got a lot more work to do to get this state's fiscal house in order. So anyway, thank you for calling that out. I appreciate it. Thank you for all the rest of the work you've done. Look forward to working with you on some other issues. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. So I want to move on to the business agenda. I do want to make note that we are about 43 minutes behind schedule, and that's significant because what's next up after the business agenda is a budget hearing, and we expect to have public input, and we've already kept them waiting for 45 minutes. So any discussion about business agenda items, if we could keep it brief, that would be helpful. Okay, so the board will now vote on the business agenda. Ms. Powell, are there any changes to the business agenda?
No, there's not.
Okay. Do I have a motion and a second to adopt the business?
Actually, there's a change to one of the policies that it's minor, but it, you want me to explain what it is?
Different from what was posted?
We had this discussion once before, but it's the civic use of buildings policy. I think Director Bailey made the grammatical observation that the list of organizations should follow the word organizations, the word organization, and the current version we have in front of us does not do that, although we previously discussed it. It's not a material change, but it just should be changed before we adopt it. So do I need to offer?
I think it's probably cleaner just to offer the amendment, have the amendment approved, because it wasn't posted. It's a non-substantive change, so that can be done at this second reading stage.
Okay.
Do you remember that? I remember who pointed out the error. So maybe just briefly, and I apologize to the chair because I didn't have a lot of advance notice to say, but I generally think we should have a discussion and vote on our policies, especially if they're substantive policies, not as part of the business agenda, but as a freestanding, just freestanding votes and discussions so the community has visibility before we adopt them. So we have 3 policies tonight that came from the Policy and Governance Committee. One of them, it's the one that requires the amendment, but it also did have some public comment. So if board members didn't receive that, this is the policy that allows for a custodial waiver, fee waiver for Title I schools and other schools that represent historically underserved students. So we received positive comment and support for the policy change, so that should be good. And if you want a motion to move the resolution, do we move the resolution first? Motion to move the resolution. I move that we move the resolution number, so we can get to the policy change. I don't have my business agenda first. It is resolution number 5584. 5884, sorry. Was that a second? and a correction?
Okay, so we have a motion to amend, is that Chair?
First, we got to move.
We have a motion to approve the resolution in a second. Now we need a motion to amend.
Okay.
Okay, Madam Chair, I move that we amend the policy to move the language that has been previously discussed and approved conceptually by the board. The parentheses, E period, G period, comma, PTA, PTO, or booster clubs in paren, and to move that to behind the word organizations. It's just correctly placing.
Second.
Okay. Do we have any discussion on the amendment? Okay. All in favor of the amendment, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say no. Any abstentions? Okay, the amendment passes by a vote of 6-0. Okay. Oh,
I'm at the end. Yes.
Student Representative Paisler votes yes. Okay, any other changes?
No other changes, but I would just ask that we share the policy change with the schools that potentially could benefit from the custodial waivers, so fee waivers for when they have events at their schools and they aren't able to support that financially, that we share that with the schools so they know it exists, so it's not just something that exists in sort of the policy manual, but that it actually schools know it's available and utilize it for community-based events.
So there'll be an administrative directive that comes out around this, and I think that would be a good mechanism for sharing with.
I think it's already been drafted.
School communities.
There will be the accompanying administrative directive. It would be our intention to annually refresh that listing of schools and to provide specific instructions prior to the start of the school year so they could plan their events accordingly.
Awesome.
Okay, so I'd like to ask for a motion and a second to adopt the business agenda
So moved.
with.
Well, no,
We still have to vote.
We have-
You
On the
still have to
resolution.
vote on Resolution 5884. As amended.
Okay. Do I have a motion and a second to?
It's been moved and seconded already.
Okay. All in favor of adopting the?
It's been a long day.
It's been a very long day. It's been a very long week, and it's only Tuesday. Do I have a motion and a second to adopt the? Okay, let's vote. Let's vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No. Any abstentions? We're good. Okay.
Yes.
Student Representative Paisler voting yes. Okay. All right. So Resolution 5884 passes by motion of 6-0 with Student Representative Paisler voting yes. Okay. Okay. Now, the rest of the business agenda. Can I have a motion and a second to adopt the business agenda?
So moved.
Director Bailey moves, Director Esposito-Brown seconds the adoption of the business agenda. Is there any public comment? Yes, no?
No, I'm sorry. No.
Okay. Is there any board discussion?
I just had a question for the Deputy Superintendent of Business and Operations on the Piper Jaffray contract. And I believe they are the experts in the state on bond, but I'm curious, since it was directly negotiated, was there a reason why we didn't do an RFP? And I'm assuming we're paying standard rates?
So this is, they're our financial advisor or municipal advisor for our future. They've been a part of this district for a long term. So it's really about the quality of advice and the long-term relationship with this district. They helped us think through the 30-year plan for going forward for modernizing our facilities. And so really continuing with the top expert in the state for school bond plans, financial plans, is the intent of the district to continue that relationship. And so it is a new contract, but it has very similar terms as to our previous contract. Our previous contract isn't done yet, but we're starting to talk about future bonds that would be outside of the contract terms, so that's why we're now bringing a new one forward so that we can continue to work.
And it's a competitive market rate.
I don't have that in my head, I'm sorry. I could not respond to that right now.
Okay, any other board discussion? Okay, the board will, did I hear something? No? Okay. The board will now vote on the business agenda. All in favor, please indicate by saying yes.
Yes.
Yes. All opposed, say no. Any abstentions? Business agenda is approved by a vote of 6-0 with Student Representative Hazel voting.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Okay, at this time, we will adjourn this meeting. And momentarily, we'll take a 5-minute break, and then we'll reconvene for a budget hearing in this room. Okay, the meeting is adjourned. turned on?
I heard an echo on the last turned off.
Okay, so there we go. Okay. We're going to reconvene. I'd like to call this public hearing for May 14th, 2019 to order and convene the board as the Budget Committee. Thank you all for still being here. The board has set aside this evening to hear your comments on the superintendent's proposed 2019-2020 budget. We are requesting that you please limit your comments to 2 minutes. Public feedback is very important to us. The board, acting as the Budget Committee, will take everything into consideration.
Sorry, that was not for you.
Time's up. I guess I'm done.
I'm sad.
We will take everything into consideration before approving the budget, and that vote is scheduled currently for May 28th. The interpreters, I believe, are still with us. And anyone requiring interpretation? Everybody's in the back, right? Okay. Okay. Before we begin the public comment period, I'd like to review the guidelines for public comment. They're essentially the same as they were for the previous public comment. We thank you for being here and taking the time to talk to us. Guidelines for public input emphasize respect and consideration of others. Complaints about individual employees should be directed to the superintendent's office as a personnel matter. Presenters will have a total of 2 minutes to share your comments. Please begin by stating your name and spelling your last name for the record. During the first minute of your testimony, a green light will appear. When you have 1 minute remaining, a yellow light will go on. And when your time is up, the red light will go on and a buzzer will sound. We respectfully ask that you conclude your comments at that time. We appreciate your input and thank you for your cooperation. Okay, Ms. Powell.
We have two. We have Kolini Fisitua and Steve Buell.
And first, let me apologize for the lateness of this hearing. We're about an hour behind schedule, so apologies.
So, good evening. My name is Kolini Fusitua, Kolini Fusitua. I'm a staff of IRCO, Immigrant and Refugee Community Organization, and I'm the coordinator for Portland Public School Program, FACES program. That's Family and Community Engagement Services. And we have services in North Portland and throughout PBS. So I'm here to advocate and ask for continued support of the FACES program. And this is a very beneficial program to the immigrant and refugee community that we serve. A lot of these communities, they're here and they're on so-called survival mode, so they have 2-3 jobs, and you know they're supporting their children. It's just what they give at home and their advice, but they need extra support in school, and that's where our staff comes in. And then we're here today with one of our family that is benefiting from the program, and she's from the Pacific Island community, and I'm going to introduce her shortly. But this program is here to support African immigrant, Asian family, Vietnamese community, the Slavic community, and as well as the Pacific Island community. And the PI community is the fastest growing population here in Oregon, according to 2000 census. And today I brought one of our clients. Her name is Luapa, and she's going to introduce herself and carry on. Thank you.
Being a Blazer fan, I must wear my Blazer shirt today. So, co-Blazers. So, my name is Luhama, like he introduced. I live in the North Portland from Pacific Island community. So, we have a program, sewing program, which was supplied at George Middle School, and that's the only place they do the sewing class. As far as Faces, they're the one who support the program. Also, my son, tutoring, my son, I have a hard time with my son. Moving over here, I don't have more education, but I want my son, my kids to grow up better here, get a better future. So I reached out to some help from Colini about my son. So they offer a program for tutoring to improve. So far now, my son, I can see the improve from reading, math. Last month, he received a principal award, and last week she received enrichment award, which is make me proud of living this country and have all the opportunity here. And I'm so grateful for them, for all the support they offer for us, so my kids have a better life and better future, and also my Tongan community here. Thank you.
So twice a year, we're required to submit a report, a mid-year report and end of the year report. And these are the success stories that we share that you read. But I want to bring a live person so you can hear the emotion that they have, which we cannot express in the report and so forth. So thank you for listening.
Thank you.
Thanks for.
Thank you, Chair. I know that we're following up with ERCO precisely because of the importance of these kinds of services, which we intend to continue supporting. Thank you for your testimony.
All right, next is Steve Buell.
I love a $1 billion budget and a couple 100-page booklet, and they give you 2 minutes. Here we go. School Board and Superintendent, my name is Steve Buell, B-U-E-L. Let's be clear. While the budget document has been improved, the budget itself perpetuates the disparities, the inequalities, the inequities, and sorry to say it, the racism of the budgets which have directed how PPS spends its money for the last 28 years. While the previous board and interim superintendent, Yusef Awad, had set up a process which would have equalized programs in kindergarten through 8th grade and created equitable special programs, such as special reading and ESL. This superintendent and school board have backtracked, thus having a budget structure which continues to handicap children in lower economic neighborhoods compared to children who live in higher economic neighborhoods. I don't know if this was done because of political pressure, ignorance, or racism. It's probably a combination of all three. But it remains that if you are poorer, then your school gets less of its needs met. And this impacts the school in a way which causes parents who can flee to often do so, bolstering the downward spiral of education in that school. And the reverse happens in upper economic neighborhoods. By equalizing programs, it would also allow you to make special programs equitable. And the impact here would be huge. Take special reading, for instance. Schools with more kids who are way behind should get more FTE to address this than schools where most kids are pretty well caught up. A formula should determine this, not the whim of the principal, who often acts without the knowledge of any administrator. Without the equal programs, then there is no transparency on how each school is meeting the special needs of its children. This is a fairly simple concept, but it takes real courage to act on it. So far, only Paul Anthony of the top administrators and board members has done so. Hopefully, the new board members will have this courage and understand they are the representatives of all the taxpayers and all the children, something that seems lacking with most of the people in this room. Go Blazers.
Thank you. Ms. Powell?
No more.
No more? Do I dare say, does anyone else want to speak? Okay. Okay. All right. Thank you for your comments. So, this public hearing is adjourned. Thank you to everybody who testified, and we're now going to move on to a work session. This budget work session of the Board of Education for May 14, 2019 is called to order. Welcome to everyone
Not
present.
here. It's upstairs in Mazama.
we're going upstairs.
We're going upstairs?
To Mazama.
Okay, we're going upstairs to Mazama.
Stephanie, can you sign out those forms so I can go upstairs? Just, they'll tell you where to sign.
I sign.